Good morning, everyone. Yang and Zhao here. Today, extra special guest, all the way from the other side of the world, where he has corrected his camera to be right side up. We have the man, the legend, the coolest of bros, and the guy who never stops thinking about tabletop role playing games.
Hello everyone, CJ here from the Don't Stop Singing channel and the Cool History Bros. Well, it's great that you brought me back, Young. It's been a while, and it's gonna be great talking to you again.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's always great having you on. It always make me think about things in different ways. Um, so we were talking a bit backstage about the state of the tabletop industry, and we are at interesting crossroads. I think where the dominant game overall in the world, although not necessarily in local markets, is Dungeons and Dragons, which seems to be flagging. Their 2024 update has not really been well received. Some people say quality. Some people say it's not different enough from the 2014 D&D version. Um, where where do we go
Well,
uh, as far as the industry?
I would say we can start looking at the competitors. Well, not specifically mention our own games, Young's game or my game. The thing is, we are in a state where we have so many competitors. For example, Critical Role just released their Dagger Heart, and we have Shadow Dark that is
Mhm.
quite popular among the OSR community. And Matt Colville will be released. Has he released this game yet? I'm not quite
Uh,
sure. He had a successful crowdfunding,
that's a good
but
question.
yeah.
I have played tests
Mhm.
in test groups for it.
Right.
I don't know. I think maybe they're not quite fully released yet, but it's very very well developed already. It's
Mhm.
almost there, I would imagine.
Right. Yeah. Well, the thing is, we are in a state where we have a lot of competitors, a lot of systems, but perhaps not. If we can compare them as operating systems, we are in a place where we may be lacking the killer apps for those operating systems. So perhaps each of them need to create their own killer modules or killer campaign, and uh, it would also mean there is also opportunity for smaller studios to create system agnostic campaigns or system
Mhm.
agnostic adventures to fill in that gap. This is where we have like Sony, Xbox, and Nintendo, and we can survive as third party developers for
Yeah,
these operating systems or consoles.
yeah. I think you're right about it's going to be the third party that really drives any of these systems to be sort of the mainstay. That's one thing about Shadow Dark, which I'm not quite sure how old. I think it's about 2 years old now.
Mhm.
I see a lot of people developing for it, even people I know in the creator community. They're all excited about it, and I
Mhm.
think it's really those third party apps which people aren't necessarily excited about the mechanics
Mhm.
of a system, but it's the, oh, I want to play in this world, I want to play in the setting,
Mhm.
and therefore I will use whatever system that they
Mhm.
recommend. Um, what So first of all, when you say killer app, what do
Mhm.
you think the hallmarks of a killer app are for all these systems?
Well, the killer app for Microsoft was Microsoft Word and Microsoft Excel. Everyone needs a spreadsheet. Back then, Google apps did not exist. So this is the apps that drive people to buy the system, to buy into the system. So even for example, like um, the, in consoles, these are the console exclusives that draw people in it. So For Nintendo, it is Legend of Zelda, or from for Xbox, it is Halo. These are the system sellers. They need that venture that get people to play their system, to buy into their new game systems for the tabletop RPGs.
Yeah. So how would you, so if you're, let's say, a third party developer,
Mhm,
you know that these systems need the killer app. How do
mhm,
you go about splitting the difference between killer app and
mhm.
system agnostic? Because the more agnostic you get, the less specific you can be with the system's mechanics.
All right, yeah. Well, for the system agnostic side of things, I think it's more of what independent studios, perhaps like something I may be planning, or perhaps something you are planning.
Mhm.
As a third party, we can create something system agnostic to fill in the gap that's created by all these different systems. But for the systems publisher themselves, like the Darrington Press, Critical
Mhm.
Role's publishing site, they have to create a killer app. That's their job. Our job is to create the system agnostic campaigns. So this is,
That's true.
uh, yeah, yeah. And I think we may be at a time where these publishers would need us. They would need to draw in the third party developers. And as a third party developers, if we are really good at creating campaigns, perhaps we can just wait for them to show us a bit more bones. Because for what's it called, Darrington Press, for Daggerheart, they have already released their SRD, system reference
Yeah.
documents, really quickly, really early too. So they know that they need the third parties.
Yes, although that does bring us to a little bit of legal issues in the sense that now I haven't read through Daggerheart exactly, but
Mm,
a lot of people are saying it's very similar to when D&D was through the OGL,
mm,
um, and a lot of people are not so excited about
mm,
the licensing terms, I guess you would say.
mm.
Do
Yeah.
you think that we're gonna? Well, Shadowheart is fairly open.
Mhm,
I haven't had a chance to talk to Kelsey yet. I'll get her on the channel one day,
mhm.
but they it seems to be pretty much open as long as you're not trying to say like it's an official thing and
Right.
you're not using some of the things for profit. She seems to be okay. Do
Mhm.
you think more companies are going to open up what they allow third-party developers to use, or are we going to be like in the Dungeons and Dragons situation where you got to change monster names and you got to
Mm.
change everything else because you can't use anything Wizards owns?
Well, I think, um, well, I don't think it would be just that open, because definitely as a publisher, they need to keep a few of their IPs to themselves.
Yeah.
But in general, because we have so many competitors now, I think they need to keep things relatively open, because it's a bit of a with the fall of D&D. Well, it's not complete fall. They may
Yeah.
return with the sixth edition or something. We don't know when, but right now there is a bit of a power vacuum. So it's a
Yeah.
bit of like a dog eat dog world, and there's gonna be a need to get as many third-party publishers as they can, perhaps. But I don't know 100% how they are going to implement that, or uh, independent publishers will what's it called, invest all their that much energy into creating products for all these other systems. Yeah. But we'll see. Perhaps it would be more, if people can find a way to make the job a lot easier. Definitely, people are just going to buy it. I know the Battle Zoo publisher, Roll for Combat. I forgot
Mhm.
his channel's name, but he is already creating module, or make his module system compatible to Shadow Dark already.
Oh,
So
nice.
there are people biting.
Very
Yeah,
cool.
just leave more bait for us.
Yeah, I think we're in a very weird position with funding for things.
Hmm.
Um, Most people who are not in the creator
Hmm.
side of tabletop gaming don't realize just how little money there is in it for creators.
Right.
Um, where you could have a campaign that's $100,000 US in
Mhm.
sales, and
Right.
like maybe you end up with $20,000 in your pocket, and but it
Mhm.
took you 3 years to make.
Yeah.
So it's not something we can all quit our day jobs on.
Yeah.
So I guess the question is really, you know, how how does the whole funding thing work? And creators need to be agile and be able to switch to different systems, but
Yeah.
yet it's hard to commit to something when we're in this state of flux. I think it was easier for the people making
Mhm.
content like in 2015, 2017, when there was
Mhm.
one very clearly dominant system, as
Yeah.
opposed to now it's like, well, I got to make it for Daggerheart, I got to make it for Shadow
Right.
Dark, I got to make
Mhm.
it, oh, maybe these people like Castles and Crusaders.
Yeah. Well, I really don't have an answer to that. It's, I guess, it's a bit of like a matter of recognizing or getting in touch with your own community, with your current existing players. So
Yeah.
I think there was one of those saying that you only need 1,000 true believers of your product to have a market, and if you work well with your community, perhaps they can pretty much evangelize your work.
Hmm.
So we'll see. If your community really likes certain system, I guess you can also support them. That's where you can start, I guess.
Yeah, I guess that's true. So sort
Mm.
of switching topics a little bit.
Right.
Speaking of starting,
Mhm.
um, being in Australia, you are in another part of the world which is has a lot of different influences than we have over here in North America.
Mhm.
And I know you've been investigating the tabletop
Yep.
scene in mainland China.
Yep.
Um, so, one of the things is whenever you're going to create a new game here in the US,
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
automatically going to be compared to Dungeons and Dragons, or
Mhm.
if it's another genre, you're going to be compared to some system that's come
Mhm.
before.
Mhm.
Mainland China does not have a tabletop gaming culture. They certainly have a video gaming culture, but they
Oh, I would
they
disagree with that. I mean, with the not having the tabletop culture, it
oh
is
yeah
growing, it is new. And last year, they had a convention, a big convention in Shanghai
oh
with 1,000 tabletop RPG players,
wow
1,000 attendees. And this year, they are expecting 2,000. It's their convention is coming up in August.
Wow. That's very interesting. But since they don't have, let's say, the 50 years
Yeah.
legacy of it like we do here in the West, how does that change in terms of the development of the games, like what they're interested in, what they're willing to accept as
Mhm.
as okay versus what we see in other countries?
Well, the thing is, usually that product needs to be popular somewhere else first.
Hmm.
Um, Japan is very influential. Of course, since a long time ago, there is a really small group of players who are interested in D&D, all those American like tabletop RPGs. But the boom started with Call of Cthulhu, Japanese version of Call of Cthulhu.
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. The Japanese Call of Cthulhu gameplay culture was brought into China. The majority of the players are playing Call of Cthulhu, but uh, Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder have their community. It is the second largest. I would say, from my own observation, uh, it is still much smaller than Call of Cthulhu player
Mhm.
community, but it is growing, and it's quite a healthy community compared to Japan. In Japan, the D&D community and those sort of like community is much smaller than China's. I would say because China, strangely, China is more open to accepting American culture, things that are popular in America.
Yes.
right? And for example, the first Chinese produced commercial tabletop RPG was a wuxia RPG. I interviewed the creator on my channel, and his game is also influenced by D&D, but it's played quite differently because it is wuxia.
Mhm.
Obviously, they
Yeah.
use just one D20 without any other dice.
Oh,
Makes
interesting.
things a lot simpler, but also, the thing is, they are not making things simple for simplicity's sake, because from the rolling side they make it simple, but they make the skill selection a lot more robust, a lot more complex, because this is how they like it in China. That's how they imagine how a wuxia game would be. You have this skill against that skill. You have to break that skill with my certain skill that I learned from a certain mountain, from a certain monk, all that sort of stuff. That is whole history that goes behind one special skill. That's the sort
Uh,
of stuff like, yeah,
that makes a lot of sense,
right.
actually.
And
Um, mhm.
yeah, okay. One more thing. You would imagine that since in China people are so busy with their work, there's the uh, 996
996.
culture and all this sort of thing. You would imagine that they prefer smaller games, smaller, just one-offs, or something like what's popular in Japan. But they actually prefer the opposite. They like really long sessions, because
Huh.
that's how they get to stay in a game shop for one whole day and play a one really long session, or a couple of long sessions chained together. They like spend 8 hours to 10 hours, because if they want to commit on a game or a certain game day, they just commit to it. Perhaps it's because it resembles their TV drama culture, because their TV dramas, all drama series has 50 to 100 episodes or something. They are used to long form media. Yeah,
Oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense now that you mention it.
yeah, that's right.
I wouldn't have thought that,
Mhm.
but that does absolutely make sense. So you mentioned people are playing at game shops. This was always
Yep.
my one big question about tabletop
Mm.
gaming in China, because China
Yep.
doesn't really have the same culture of inviting people over to your house. I
Yep.
mean, it's not that they don't do that, but they don't usually have big house parties.
Yeah.
It's more like we'll go to a restaurant or something.
Mhm. Yep.
So are game shops the primary place where people are playing this, or are there other spaces, or how does it work?
Game shop and online. Yeah,
Okay.
these are their two primary places. But game shop, I've spoken to quite a few game shop owners. Usually, it's a bit of like a semi-paid service.
Mhm.
They pay a certain amount of money. It's almost like a club. At
Okay.
least there's a bit of a sunken cost, so that the people will keep returning. For example, you pay certain amount of money for a certain number of sessions. Perhaps some of them would have a profit sharing with the GMs, and
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
and
So
they provide the room, and they provide the printing sometimes, all that sort of stuff,
oh,
and they create a community, because they it is a shop after all. They just can't run everything for free.
yeah, yeah.
Even the shop needs upkeep for the cleanup and also the electricity. Yeah.
So then are the GMs, are they, is
Mhm.
it almost like a paid position? Like, where certain, I mean, we don't, I guess we sort of have it a little bit with like a Matt
Mhm.
Mercer or a Chris Perkins,
Mhm.
where like, oh, I want to be in their game.
Mhm.
Is that how it's developing over in China, where you're starting to get GMs who are like, oh, this guy's got a really good game. I want to pay to be in his 10 session Call of
Mm,
Cthulhu campaign.
I would say that it's I'm not 100% include in on that, but I know how a lot of shops operate.
Mhm.
Some do have profit share, but Many actually just rely on the GM's passion. Perhaps they will
It's free.
give their yeah, that's how a lot of these things work. Because GMs, they're the funniest people in the world. They are the ones who are spending all the money to buy the modules and the rule book
Hmm.
to get people to play their games, uh, and hardly get any of the profit. They are pretty much using these GMs for their passion, but at least they still get the uh, joy out of running their games.
So,
Um, yeah,
so it's like
some
Western countries.
yeah, that's right. Pretty much the same. Yeah, pretty much the same. Only some shops do profit sharing, not all.
And are these shops? I mean, I don't know how much you know, but are
Mm,
they just gaming, or is it like
mm,
one thing over in the U.S.
mm,
Comic shops and game shops have sort of merged because both
yep,
have difficult business models, and I've
mm,
seen a lot of well, COVID sort of messed things up, but there were a lot of like
mm,
bars or like cafes that
mm,
were also kind of gaming shop where you come in, they're making money on the drinks and the food, but then you could play whatever. They have tons of games on the shelves that you can play for free. Uh, is
yep,
is there any culture like that developing over there? Because I always thought
yep.
that would be something kind of interesting there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I would say there are two major influences behind. Well, it is exactly as you are saying. A lot of them are actually tabletop gaming shops. You can play any tabletop games, and there are groups that are running tabletop RPGs there. So it's pretty
Okay.
much the same sort of like community that are translatable. You know,
Hmm.
after playing tabletop, they'll play a tabletop RPG, or they will play some tabletop games before the RPG session start, all that sort of stuff. It's not specifically one. It's not specifically run for tabletop RPGs. Um, uh, and these sort of shops, they are usually on office buildings or even like certain apartments that on certain levels they have a room that's run as a small business,
Uh-huh.
right? So it's
That's right. I
usually
forgot about that.
right, yeah, that sort of stuff. It's and usually the place is pretty cramped, but they put in quite a bit of sofas and tables, and it
Mhm.
is, can be quite loud. But uh, I guess that's what they are used to. At least you always knew that there is a group of people who are in the same sort of like hobby, who can just see what those other tables are playing. If once there's when they're playing Settlers of Catan, they are playing Pandemic. They can see the other table playing tabletop RPGs, and they may just jump to a different game.
Ah, that's interesting. Yeah, so when I lived in China 20 years ago,
Yep.
um, it was very interesting culture-wise
Mm-hmm.
because China definitely has very much like a group culture.
Mm-hmm.
And like to explain it to a Western audience, like here you would have an apartment building, and if you
Yep.
were in a very fancy place, maybe there would be two or three buildings that are part of the same complex. I
Mm-hmm.
lived in a small one that had 23 buildings. And larger ones, like I lived in one for a few months that had like 52.
Mm-hmm.
And there was always public space.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, like the big things were like people, they had like community ping pong and
Mm-hmm.
pool
Yep.
and stuff like that. But there, at that time, there was no gaming culture outside of that, or like
Mhm. Right.
I don't know, we call it Chinese checkers, I guess,
Right. Yep.
or the Chinese chess. I can't think of the name.
Yep. Yep.
But
Xiangqi.
yes, yes,
Yep.
thank you.
Right.
Um, but I was wondering how exactly it would develop because it
Mm-hmm.
seems like culturally,
Mm-hmm.
um, it seems like a very good fit for Chinese people,
Mm-hmm.
except the question would be where, exactly where are they going to play these things? But that's interesting that it's growing. So you mentioned they had a convention in Shanghai,
Mm-hmm.
and they're planning on this one. Are you aware if there are other cities, especially the larger cities, that are thinking about this, or it's not quite to that level yet?
Uh, I am not 100% clued in, but I am sure there would be other conventions in larger cities. It's just that usually uh, they may be combined with other events, other tabletop events, or uh,
Mm,
sometimes uh, we are not uh, really clued in immediately because uh, most of the stuff are usually in Chinese media in a
yeah,
smaller group because to us they may seem to be reasonably sized, but since China is so big, it is quite small in their scale. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
2,000 people is really small when it comes to China because China is just so big. Yeah, and the thing is, there is in terms of China, there is almost uh, near invisible sort of like community online because we don't usually Google or search in Chinese characters.
yeah.
Their communities would be, if you want to find them, it would be more in like Weibo or sort of Red Notes or sort of like their own social media. So they may seem quite invisible to us, but it is there. They have almost a invisible online community to the rest of the Western world because pretty much just because a lot of Western people can't read Chinese.
Yeah, yeah.
When I start looking for stuff in Chinese, then things started appearing.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I know this is not necessarily a tabletop
Mm,
question, but since the rise of AI and kind of sort of insta translation, do you
mhm,
think that the sort of the really it's kind of a sub community over there
mm,
right now.
yeah.
Do you think that that will be more apparent to people outside of China, and there'll be more communication and interplay, and we take some influence from them, they take some more influence from us.
Yeah, that would be great. Actually, I've been looking at a lot of like Japanese RPGs too
Hmm.
uh, in China because a lot of them can actually uh, well the whatever is popular in Japan is popular in China in a matter of no time, in a blink, right? So this is pretty much how uh, the tabletop RPG community was uh, exploded because of the popularity of Call of Cthulhu in Japan. So they
Hmm.
picked that up, and then D&D and other like American tabletop RPGs grow on the wake of Call of Cthulhu. Mm, So, but in terms of the AI sort of thing in China, I don't think it's uh, going to catch on that much in this sort of like domain because
Hmm.
uh, in China it's pretty much like the rest of the world. They are happy to use it on daily life, but when it comes to their own products, AI uh, may feel cheap
Mm, yeah.
because Chinese people do like value. If
Yes.
you give them AI, it does feel cheap. It's starting. We can just kind of compare it from their gacha community. Their gacha
Mm,
mobile games is really popular. If you
yeah.
give them AI character, AI waifus, they're not gonna be happy. They want a specially crafted, artistically crafted waifus, the best of the best. They don't want AI
That's true.
slop for their waifu. Yeah, right.
That's
Um, yeah, uh, and this is really interesting. And as China's tabletop RPG community is growing. We can look at the Japanese tabletop RPG, which is developing in a certain direction where they're creating more smaller, more boutique sort of experience
hmm
with their Call of Cthulhu communities. If you can look up their gaming groups and so on. They have even like paid game master, paid keeper for their Call of Cthulhu games. They draw incredible like standing anime style characters for each uh, player. Uh, this is the player character that you would play as. This is how they advertise it. It's not you can be whatever you want. It's them advertising in their game. You be this character with certain amount of background with their handouts,
Hmm.
so you can experience more of a boutique sort of experience with limited amount of uh, participants. And even in their new games, for example, the Armored Core. Let me just quickly grab this Armored Core 6 tabletop RPG, which I picked up from Japan recently.
Nice.
Yes, they limited the number of player characters to four, and there's almost like
Oh.
a strict limitation for number of participants, so that they can craft a better experience, which is really interesting. And I'll also have, uh, well, maybe I'll find it next time. It's also a detective sort of tabletop RPGs where you
Hmm.
play as the main detective and the Watson character, the partner. Yeah, it's
That's
a
cool.
really small sort of like a game where there are two main players, and you can perhaps have an extra assistant. So three players and one GM, right?
Ah, that makes a lot of sense.
Right.
Uh, to me, at least for Japanese and Chinese cultures, that kind of boutique experience that
Mm,
I think it would be hard to do here, at least in the US,
mm,
since A, we're often very cheap.
mm,
And don't, if you want that kind of service, you got to pay for it. Like we'll spend $1 million on dice, but
mhm.
pay someone to develop a game? Come on.
Right, right.
Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, that does sound very Japanese to me now that you
Right.
mention it.
Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause the uniqueness of the experience is
Mhm.
what really matters.
Yeah,
Huh.
yeah.
Okay, slightly off topic, and I don't know if you know.
Mhm.
If someone is paying that much money for the boutique experience and
Yep.
getting, the custom character cutouts, my
Mhm.
concern would be that, the character dies quickly.
Mhm.
Or maybe it's just the people whose games I play in where we die
Right.
quickly.
Yep, yep.
How does that work in terms of game? Is it more performative? Like almost like we might say theater kids here, or is it are people just happy like, oh no, I guess I'll just roll up a new character? How does it work over there, if you know?
Well, I haven't participated in that sort of gaming, but in the ones that I know in China from the shopkeepers, they can compare it to the escape room experience. Uh, because
Okay.
previously, have you heard of 剧本杀, the script game? It's pretty
No, I
much,
don't know that
it
one.
was really popular in China. It's a semi escape room experience where you are 剧本杀, yeah, where you are given a script. You read about this is what your character motivation is, what he wants to do, and these are your objectives, and other people
Ah,
are given certain objectives, so they play acts in a room, and then sometimes there are multiple rooms. They can play acts in like the Sino-Japanese War, play act in like sort of like 1920s Shanghai gangster sort of stuff, and there's always a murder. You have to solve the murder before you get killed or something like that, or one of them could be the
okay.
murder. So it's a semi escape room sort of experience. So of course, if
Interesting.
you are doing this for money, you cannot kill your customer too quickly, right? Yeah. So you
Yeah.
have to find a logical place where you kill them, and also you have to kill them in a magnificent way, so that even if they are killed, they are really entertained by it.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Mm,
And well, it's interesting you say that Call of Cthulhu is big because that's how I think of Call of Cthulhu.
right.
Like, if you're playing old school D&D, you could go in that first fight.
Right. Right.
But Call of Cthulhu, you should last a while.
Yeah.
Nobody goes insane right away.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, exactly. And this is where I think I think we were previously talking about like Shadow Dark and
Hmm.
OSR related stuff.
Hmm.
What I'm finding interesting is that in these sort of markets, they are relatively new to the scene. There is not really an OSR movement because there is nothing to draw upon.
Yeah.
There is no old school for them. Their OSR could be a mimicry of American OSR, which is not really their local or true OSR in for their own society or community.
Hmm.
So I'm not sure if that's actually going to work. It's like you can't pluck their member berries
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they don't have any, they haven't grown any. But to be honest, I think in terms of OSR, uh, I really wonder if you need a game for it where it can actually just be a community or even a tradition. Because if you compare this to wargaming,
Hmm.
which is something I've been researching on a bit lately, and reading up on Peter Perla, which is the luminary of wargaming in the professional wargaming world, the one used by various military institutions, and also Colonel McCaffrey's war book on wargaming, on all that sort of stuff. They are not married or they don't believe in one system, one way of running things. Because we talk about what's it called, freeform gaming, which is
Hmm.
what OSR is trying to replicate from the early days of D&D, and
Yeah.
there are rigid gaming. They just use whatever works, or sometimes a mix and match for certain resolution. Uh, the thing is, each wargaming practitioner, they are their own game designer. For every simulation, they design their own game, they design their own setting and simulation. So it is a matter of knowing what system work best for certain situation. So I think this is where we can come in as a support for the game master. Our product should help the game master run games better rather than
Yeah.
uh, just creating a sort of a brand which they have to like follow like a religion. You have to do everything by this rule and don't think about anything else. Um, and I think it is also how I think that is not how real game masters work, because the ones in my community and all the others that I've talked to, they borrow system from here and there, from everywhere. They just run their own games according to how they like it. They're going to mix and match anyway. And so we can support our game master, our customer, with a product that really caters to their needs. Help them run better games instead of like uh, a product that they can't use on any other systems.
That makes a lot of sense. I think that's it. Uh, well, we'll get back to wargaming in just a second,
Mm.
but it's
Oh, yeah.
interesting because I've been talking to people recently about
Mhm,
changes in Western culture, at least in the US and Europe,
mhm,
where things that were sort of bedrock,
mm,
um, stable,
mm,
cultural things that you didn't really need to explain. Um,
mhm.
they're eroding, so now you need
Yep,
to explain them, like one of them being religion, and
yep,
what in the context of a medieval fantasy game does that mean to a person who's playing like a cleric? What does it mean to the people of the village that you're in? What does it mean in the greater political sense to the country you're in? And then in a world where theoretically gods are actually
yeah,
hanging out in public, all
mhm,
the time.
yep, yep,
Um, Whereas like back in the 70s, at least in the US, most people went to church. So you didn't have to explain those things as much when Gary and Fred were making D&D, whereas like now you do. And I can definitely see the utility where if you're creating sort of guidelines or systems of thought to really help the DM, like here's how you
Yep.
really dial in this aspect of your game,
Mhm. Yep.
that it really is pretty system agnostic.
Mhm.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right,
Um,
right.
but I am curious. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh no, I think you're completely right. It's like, people think about it. Since D&D was first released to now, it's been 50 years. It's a half
Yeah.
a
Yeah. Yeah.
century.
Yeah.
The culture community generate. It's like at least 2.5 generations ago. Uh, uh, it's a completely different culture now. It's difficult to explain how people used to practice their religion back then, and I
Hmm.
think people nowadays couldn't even imagine a life without their mobile phones,
Yeah.
their smartphones. We had like mobile phones back in the 90s, perhaps, with their Nokia and all that sort of stuff. It is so
Hmm.
different to what we have right now. Yeah,
Yeah. When you actually would want to meet people after work and
yeah,
go hang out with your neighbors.
right, yeah,
Um,
exactly. And even in one of the regions in my setting, we have
mhm.
pager, which is really quaint, even though it was from the 1980s. People had pager, those beepers.
Yep.
But now it is retro and kind of like cool, even though it's kind of dumb. Right.
No, no, I agree. Sorry, but turning back to wargaming,
Mhm.
I have also been more interested in wargaming
Yep.
recently,
Yep.
since the last chapter of my campaign guide uses wargaming heavily.
Mhm.
Um, do you see wargaming as sort of coming back? Like you mentioned before, when D&D first started,
Mhm.
it says we'll go use the rules from this wargaming chainmail.
Yep. Yep.
um, do you think we're eh, I don't know, at least 5e is almost completely divorced of wargaming.
Right.
Do you
Right.
see it like coming back into the hobby as a general, um, or is it sort of now its own niche?
I guess we have to specify first what sort of wargaming we're talking about.
Hmm.
Wargaming that is played as a game, a hobby wargaming, which is like Warhammer or those sort of
Yeah.
like the ones that use miniature, or professional wargaming used by the army. Because through the development of D&D, when they were playing Brownstein, and
Hmm.
before D&D, from the Gary Gygax's lineage, they had chainmail, but from Dave Arneson's lineage, you have Dave Arneson's Blackmore game, which is derived from the Brownstein games that he
Hmm.
played with. Uh, the group, I forgot his name, this person's name, sorry about that, but in this Brownstein game, it is really derived heavily from wargaming, from actual professional wargaming. The Brownstein game is not is not a series of campaign. It is
Yeah.
just one Brownstein game, and they have like multiple different forms of Brownstein games, so which each of them simulates different situation. That is how professional wargaming is run. They want to test a certain situation to see if their war theories or their strategy will work. And the thing is, you are supposed to change the system, the model, every time you have run a game, because you want to refine it, make it more accurate, and make your strategy more adaptable to the new situation. So wargaming professional wargaming is not about who will win, who will lose. It's about whether this uh, uh, whether our strategy will be useful, or what sort of danger, what sort of like issues will we meet, if we
Hmm.
implement it. So it's an experiment. Wargaming, professional wargaming is an experiment. You are not
Yeah.
supposed to determine who wins or lose. If you determine that, it
Mhm.
means that you are just lying to yourself. You are not. team A and team B, they are not doing their best to overcome the other side. Sometimes it's used for propaganda. Some I think I forgot which German Kaiser that used
Oh,
wargaming just to prove his own. Yeah,
Bismarck, I
Bismarck,
think.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Bismarck, yeah. He always wins his war games, which is a bad idea because he's just trying to make himself look invincible. That's he's not learning anything.
Um, so that's an interesting point. Clearly, if you're talking about military, you
Mhm,
always want to change it up and find
mhm,
different scenarios. And I can see your point about not winning.
mhm.
However, in the gaming space, um, do does that make sense to ask a GM and a player to always have to relearn different
Yeah.
rules of engagement every time they want to have a combat? Or is there some like happy medium between chainmail and Bronstein that's more suitable, at least for gamers of today?
I think there is possibility of making it more suitable, and I think it's going to be really great because you are creating a live enemy who are learning your tactics and combat abilities.
Hmm.
I think it would be a pretty rather than just like completely learning the player's ability and just like so that you can trounce them, you can make their life miserable. It's not fun. Maybe create a bit of like an algorithm or a way how they are going to learn their players, how they are going to adapt to the players' tactics, so that
Yeah.
players will have the benefit of the enemy's tactic being slightly telegraphed to them, so that they can still feel powerful. They have a bit of control over the situation, and that is the increasing amount of difficulty, real difficulty, rather than fake difficulty some games do by increasing the attack power of the enemies. Just perhaps like strategic complexity, increasing strategic complexity, which makes the player feel fairly challenged rather than just numbers going up.
That makes sense.
Right.
Um, and so,
Mhm.
how to say? Do you think that like players of sort of standard fantasy tabletop role playing games will be more likely to include some wargaming aspects to it? Because to me, it seems like, especially the dynamicism.
Mhm.
Um, there's always the railroad versus sandbox debate, um,
Mhm. Yeah.
and it seems to me that somewhere in the middle is probably best, where it seems
Mhm.
like it's heading towards something, but you always want the possibility that things could, shift at any moment.
Mhm.
Which a good wargaming, I don't know how you'd say,
Yeah.
module or accessory to
Right.
whatever
Yes.
campaign you're playing really adds that, because it can completely change all the facts on the ground.
Mhm.
Do you think that's something that maybe is coming back, or there'll be some new sort of method to it that integrates it better?
I think you're right. Somewhere in the middle has worked well with my own community, with my own
Mhm.
players. But I think in the end, it's a matter of managing expectations
Yeah.
because certain styles sometimes, changing styles within one campaign can work too,
Mhm.
because uh, e- even the GM, even the players are human. There are ups and downs. Sometimes they just don't want to care about all this drama. I had a really long day at work. I just want to like roll some dice, kill some enemies, and get it
Yeah.
done. Yeah. So I think it's a matter of like giving them the choice. Yeah, and make the choice easy for them to. I think we are really just helping GMs run their games better. Pretty much, we are their
Yeah.
enablers, really. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I always say I'm not writing a story. I write cool instances
Mhm.
for players to be awesome in.
Right. Right. Yep. That's
Um,
right.
So, do you think for your own writing for Cloudbreaker, have you been able to like pick out any useful bits from the wargaming?
In terms of wargaming, yeah. Well, currently, well, the thing is, everybody has been running the same sort of like epic adventure, just uh, go to Mordor, throw the ring, or
Hmm.
fight the orcs and so on. Um, with Cloudbreaker Alliance, we are trying to create new ways to solve problems. This also
Mm.
corresponds with wargaming's evolution. Uh, let's see, Colonel Matthew B. Caffrey, his book on wargaming, I really like it because it describes four generations of wargaming.
Oh.
The first generation is abstract games like chess. The second generation is Kriegspiel. This is where a lot of tabletop gaming draws their lineage from.
Hmm.
Um, and the third generation, uh, this is where it gets interesting because in Kriegspiel they're starting to simulate real wars, and how the army will move, and this is uh, their positioning and everything. This is more of a simulation of the tactical side of wargaming. And in the third generation, uh, Caffrey is kind of like, he says that it arose sometime during the Weimar Republic. This
Hmm.
is when they realized that the army have forgotten to uh, account for political implications of their attacks and their campaigns. They may have uh, been able to uh, invade Belgium, get it quickly, but that action drew their opponents from UK and eventually America to join the campaign early because they weren't really expecting them to join the enemy side so quickly. Otherwise, they would have gotten a bit more land. So they are
Hmm.
including the political, the espionage, all that sort of sides. But the fourth generation of wargaming, this is something we are experiencing right now. The war goes beyond military and state means. It goes into the community side, social media, uh,
Yeah.
fake news, all that sort of stuff. So, and even the UK's army, was it their military or their navy? I forgot. They have released a handbook on influence wargaming.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, that's right. So they are talking about using all this social media and various non-state means to influence the result of a game. Even the more recent, Russia Ukraine war, there are
Hmm.
lots of fake news flying around from all different sides
Yeah.
um, on social media. Um, this is the future of wargaming. To be honest, uh, psyops has existed since a long time ago. It is just that we can compare it to generation of warfare and generation of wargaming. Wargaming follows actual warfare because it takes them a while to be able to systematize and to simulate how real war happens.
Yeah.
Because obviously, I would say that all this sort of influence psyops happened long before social media, but it takes them a while for wargaming to follow. So I think we can pretty much follow that development. How can we influence a war, or how we can influence the state of the world using non 100% combat means, because combat is still
Yeah.
fun. Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned that because two games come to mind that have
Mhm.
sort of that. One is the Civilization series,
Yep.
where you can win by cultural victory, and then later they added religious victory.
Mhm.
But one that really comes to mind is an old Japanese game. I think the first version was on the original Nintendo.
Mm.
I first played it on the Sega system, which was called Nobunaga's Ambition.
Ah, right. Yes.
Um, where, of course, there was military. You'd build this military unit and that, and you try to take over all of Japan. But they
Mm,
had a function where
mm,
you could hire ninjas to spread
mm.
rumors about the neighboring kingdom's leaders and
Yep.
demoralize them so they didn't fight as well. And you could
Mm,
hire other people like to go poison wells and burn
mm.
crops and stuff. And that
Yep.
always, 30 some
Mm,
years later, that still sticks with me. It's like, oh, that's
yep.
great. But it's interesting. I had not thought about that in terms of like official military wargaming. But
Mhm,
now I really want to check out what they've got, because at
mhm.
least the sequel to my game, has a lot of that kind of stuff involved. But
Right.
um, it's interesting just to see like how much the fourth generation wargaming has
Mhm,
developed.
mhm. Uh, it is really new. By the time Caffrey's book was released, the Influence Wargaming uh, hasn't been released yet, from the UK side. But I would say it's going to take a while until people are still going to write about that, because the people from the wargaming side, they are usually more closely aligned to the military. They
Yeah.
write things that are more closely aligned to what the military is allowed to do. So I wouldn't imagine people from the CIA or whatever agency that are more accustomed to that sort of like strategies. I don't think they would want to disclose their secrets so easily. Right.
Yeah, that's interesting. I do recall like various US military war games
Mhm. Right.
where it was one thing. There was like it's maybe 10 years ago or something. They were wargaming like a US carrier fleet
Mhm.
going into the Middle East for
All
whatever
right.
we go over there
Iraq.
for. But then there was some like lieutenant.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and he's like, "Okay, we're just gonna get a bunch of really small speedboats," and they managed to like
Uh,
sink the
yeah.
largest carrier fleet from the U.S.
Yeah.
Um, so it,
Uh,
occasionally you do hear things leak out, but
right. Yeah.
it's good to know that the system for it at least is there.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it would be good to know at least a kicks something to
Mhm.
kickstart the GMs into thinking about this sort of like non-combat resolutions, because I
Yeah.
am sure in certain campaigns people will play. This is pretty much like how Star Wars
Mhm.
was portrayed. The rebels, they just threw some bombs into a certain tunnel in the first Death Star, and somehow they win the war. How does that work? Perhaps we can give them a bit more framework to know, how all the machinations inside is actually working for the GMs, so that they have a better idea to create the next to give them pretty much a framework on how this all works, so that they can plan their next sessions a bit better, so that they know where things will go, rather than just create sessions without any framework, just invent something. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So for your own games, and when you're
Mhm.
the DM or when you're creating the
Mhm.
games, how do you find that balance between allowing people to just come up with the most bizarre, crazy ideas,
Mhm.
but then also you have to have a certain amount of structure in order to make the game interesting? Because if players are always coming up with these Deus ex machina
Uh,
explanations for what they're going to do,
mhm.
it's ultimately not that fun because they
Mhm.
don't necessarily have to go over the challenge. So how do you find that balance for yourself?
Well, the balance is, hmm, it's kind of a difficult thing. I place the fulcrum uh, according to the group. Different groups would prefer more Deus Ex Machina or certain things. It's like more serious groups usually would prefer something that's a bit more rational. because they have invested a lot of their brain work into creating a sort of a rational explanation for their actions or even their strategy towards the campaign. And so it is more of a um, player reading, pretty much. So I
Hmm.
read the players and think, what sort of like approach would work better for them. This is how I mostly work, but I always have to remind myself that I'm also one of the participants. So there's a bit of a push and pull too. And I just say, okay, well, that's interesting, but what if we push it slightly towards my side too? Just make
Yeah.
up the bit of difference between players and the game master. So we find the right balance for different tables. Because if everything is Deus ex machina, I would just get too exhausted myself.
Yeah. And it's interesting you mentioned making it fun for DMs,
Mhm.
because for me that's like the one. I don't know. DMs are like the thankless, like when you're the older brother and you have to like go early to work and help provide for your family, and nobody appreciates it. Like that's what being the DM feels like a lot of
Yep.
times.
Yep.
Um and nobody considers our fun. But
Right. Yeah.
like I have a pressure mechanic in my game
Mhm.
where the DM can, players sort of build up enough points, and then the
Mhm.
DM can choose to give them like an extra difficult encounter. um
Mhm.
how do you what are your thoughts on making it more fun for the DM?
I guess it really depends. I would say my approach is to give the GM more choices
Hmm.
in the systems on perhaps a table on what to roll, and it is really in terms of, well, it really depends because some GM are more of a like a input randomness GM or output randomness GM. Input randomness is a bit of like pre-roll on how you
Hmm.
set the world. The randomness comes at the start, so it's a bit more like a civilization game where the world is randomized, but after that things are more predeterministic or output randomness. You're running a certain game, and then you always rely on a table. It depends on their sort of like preference. I'm more of a input randomness person, so I prefer to have a bit more backstory and options, uh, in the session or in the campaign or in the chapter on what I can do to my players. Usually, it would be better if there are foreshadowing because if you just bring things up to your players, it gets really annoying because if they can't plan for it, it is not there's no suspense because this is something I learned from Alfred Hitchcock.
Hmm.
Suspense can keep people entertained for a long time because they keep thinking about it. They are expecting something rather than something completely random. So if you have a random table of 100 things that could happen, they can't plan for it. So in the end, it becomes just noise to them. Perhaps a small table. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's we were sort of talking about railroad versus sandbox
Yeah.
before,
Right.
and to me, that's one of the big deficiencies in a total sandbox game.
Right.
You can't have any sort of prophecy. You can't have any sort of foreshadowing. Um, you sort of rob people of the like there's exploration on a map of like I went to
Mhm.
this area, I went to that area,
Right.
but there's
Mhm.
also exploration of the world that you inhabit. And if you have absolutely no idea where the future's going,
Mhm.
um, that makes it really tough, I think. Even if
Mhm.
it's something as vague as like, oh, there's this comet coming in a year, and whenever it does, bad things happen. Like you don't need you don't need to plan like every little detail out,
Yeah.
but you need, to me it's better when you have some structure, because then too it's like you said, players start to overthink things, and
Mhm.
they start to make their own theories, and then as a DM, you could be like, "Oh yeah, that's much better than what I was thinking,"
Mhm.
and then just go with that.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, you're right. So, yeah, I guess things, different things work for different GMs and players too. So
Mhm.
it's all because in wargaming, the various art of running war games. This is also about how you cater to your sponsor and also players.
Mhm.
You account for their own biases so that you can run your simulation a bit better. So there is the soft skill of having a good social skill in GMing that is often not taught
Yeah,
in
yeah.
all books. Yeah, yeah. It's I would say GMing or dungeon mastering, whatever. It A lot of it is also a bit of like an art, and there
Mhm.
is you can sort of imagine there's a bit of an apprenticeship uh, from different
Yep.
GM traditions because I used to play with different groups, some from the church, some from the local communities, a local gaming shop, and some from home groups of really old school players. They play completely differently. People who play Masquerade,
Yeah.
they are their own breed. it's uh, it's a lot of fun, I guess, too, but it's really different flavors. Um, yeah, it's a matter of like finding your the groups is balance pretty much. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what.
yeah.
Mhm.
Hmm. It's very
Right.
interesting.
Yeah.
So uh, Cloudbreaker Alliance, you have recently released a tool to convert 5e characters
Right.
into Cloudbreaker. How has that been going? Um, has there been are there a lot of people who want to convert 5e characters into Cloudbreaker?
Well, I would say that it's there. People are happy that it is there. Not too many people use it, Uh, but people are just like happy that there's the option. But we are coming up with a quick starter for Cloudbreaker Alliance that we'll be releasing in the near future.
Oh, nice.
It is probably there. The thing is, we want to make things really easy for the GMs and for the players. Um, you know, we have a how to play chart. The GMs would need to read which sections, and the players we have cut it down to 2 pages.
Oh,
Players
wow.
only need to read their expanded character sheet to start playing, or even they don't even have to read. They can start playing and look at all the different sections that has been sectioned off. On the first part of the game, they only need to look at these tables and these numbers in their character sheets, and so on. It's more of a we want to make it really easy for GMs to run the games in conventions or even in a pick up and play sort of setting, and also give them enough choices. So, for example, if they want a cleaner character sheet, they can also use the cleaner character sheets. It's all about making the game master's life easy.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So do you have like a time estimate for when you're going to have the next Kickstarter?
Well, unfortunately, we actually had something planned earlier this year until we are hit by the truck called tariff. We are
Ah,
still trying to figure out how we are going to get over this. But talking about the killer apps, killer module, this was going to be our killer module, but it have to wait for a bit, which means that we can improve on it too. So it is
oh,
not completely bad, and we are looking at possible digital solutions. So this is hopefully it's going to work out for us, and we are trying to iron out a few things. We are talking to a few different groups that may possibly help us get things online, but
oh,
we will
nice.
see. We'll see. Yeah.
So, I am curious about this.
Mhm.
As someone in the US, tariffs
Mhm.
hurt me more as a producer.
Mhm.
It now costs me a lot more money to get my products
Right.
made and then sent out.
Mhm.
As someone down under, the US is often the main um, target market, shall we say,
Right.
of a lot of games and Kickstarters and whatnot.
Mhm.
So, how exactly has that affected you guys?
Right. Well, the United States is still the biggest market for tabletop RPGs, especially for the English language ones.
Yeah,
Uh, the thing is, because everything needs to be printed in China, or at least, if we are looking for substitutes, it is possible. Um, but it's still going to take a lot of work to see if it will work. A lot of like testing to see test deliveries and all that sort of stuff. Um, c- uh, yeah, this is what we are working on right now. A lot of a lot of like companies are suffering too. I think Ghost Fire Gaming, which is also
hmm
from Australia, I think they are thinking about things too. So we will, I guess, as a smaller group, we can look at what the larger companies are doing. So maybe we can get a second mover advantage out of it because we are too small to make the first mover advantage. Yeah, to capitalize on.
yeah, yeah. Do you see possibility in the future of sort of partnerships where you're printing, like let's say for the US market, you
Mhm.
would print in the US and then send it to some distributor to ship out to the
Mhm.
final customer? Is that, I mean, I know it's definitely more expensive to produce here, but
Yeah.
is that something that you think you may have to get into in the future? Or does it still work to find non-Chinese producers?
Mm, Well, we are looking at all the options. Well, for one thing, even drive-through RPG is an option because I think they have separate printers at
Yeah.
different parts of the world, so that may be able to get to alleviate some of the uh, tariffs costs. But we will see if there are other options. That's drive-through RPG is one of the options there.
Yeah, I don't. A lot of people over here are complaining because drive-through RPG just raised their prices significantly. So,
Again, right? Yeah,
yeah, it was a month ago, month and a half, 2 months ago, something like that.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, a lot of people. Well, it was really bad for a lot of people who ran Kickstarters because they
Mhm,
were fulfilling through
mhm,
drive-through RPG.
mhm,
And I was getting emails all of a sudden like, "Hey,
mhm,
go get your print now
mhm,
on drive-through RPG because if it goes up, you'll have to pay more
mhm,
than what you've already pledged to
mhm.
the
Right.
campaign."
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I don't know. I don't know. We're in a weird place.
Mhm,
I had trouble. I was good for the U.S. market when I was doing my campaign, but I had a
mhm,
lot of people from overseas who told me that, oh, I'd love to get a copy of your book, but
mhm.
you're selling it for $65. By
Yeah.
the time it gets to my country, it's like $130, and it's not
Right.
$130 worth of book. And
Yeah.
I can understand that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. I guess that would be an issue, unless we see a shift in the more towards the digital side, or at
Yeah,
least in this few years in the lull, perhaps there's going to be more services from the digital side that is going to cover the difference. Because right now we have, for example, a Roll20 or Foundry, but
yeah.
there is this. I forgot the name, but there is this uh, online virtual tabletop that's been working together with the creators of
Uh,
Obojima. It's been, I forgot the
is it
name.
Owl Bear?
Something like that. I'm not quite sure. With the Obojima game, that they have animated the sort of interface and so on. Um, we can wait for digital developments, I guess, to see if in the meantime, while we're creating our game, the virtual tabletop side will develop something new. Because in Japan, I want to mention this. In Japan, they have combined VR chat with tabletop RPGs. So you can
Okay,
be any character you want and play virtually in a tabletop RPG setting.
that's cool.
Yeah, yeah. They have released a module for Double Cross. That's a one of the Japanese tabletop RPG game that's been there for quite some time now. It's on third edition. It is at least 10 years old, if not older.
Hmm,
Yeah.
interesting.
So yeah, it has quite a pedigree, and they are getting quite a lot of like orders, even from corporate tabletop RPG games, uh, idle corporate RPG games, which is quite interesting. They have a whole series of idle tabletop RPGs, which is I don't know how completely how it's run. I have one of
Hmm.
the books, but I know all the rules, but the problem is, it's a rule book. It doesn't tell you how to run the game exactly.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
right.
Interesting. So, sort of along those lines, do you think that maybe in the future,
Mm,
when you go to your game shop, instead of, coming in with your books and your dice, you'll go in and everything will be digital. Like you will log into, or you'll get your room where you sit
mm,
around physically with other people, but you're playing like on a computerized screen,
mm,
where maybe you have physical characters to put, or maybe it's just all
right.
digital, um, and you're just using your character sheet on your iPad or on your
Mm.
phone. Do you think that is maybe the wave of the future, or is that like a bridge too far? Will people accept not having physical stuff?
Well, I would say the charm of tabletop RPGs, pen and paper RPGs, is having it in the physical world. But I guess
Yeah.
it is possible to use electronics as supplement to enhance the experience. But I would say what may be possible is to use projectors, because right
Mm,
now we have like small projector modules for mobile
mhm.
phones. Maybe we can use projectors to project it onto a table or something like that, to enhance the experience rather than interfacing with a machine around a table. That's like completely dumb. You can just do it in your own room, play from home. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting because that like it seems to me that there needs to be two sides. I think now that we have virtual tabletops, people like playing online. Like I used to live in California,
Mhm.
and all those people that I played with, I can still play with on occasion, even though I'm, a couple
Yeah.
thousand miles away. Um, but there is something like people
Yeah.
need to be together in the same room
Mhm.
doing stuff, and I'm not quite sure, how you balance it out.
Mhm. Well, I wouldn't say that I have the answer, but in my opinion, I think it's in the end, because it is the start of the tradition, it is the origin of the tradition. We can't not have that. Otherwise, it's just going to be video game with extra step.
Yeah, 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 exactly.
What's the point? So even in a world where the reality is, I think we are reaching that time already where most people are playing their games online rather than in
Yeah,
real life. We still need to have that option.
yeah. Well, it's different. It's a different experience.
Mm.
It's a different kind of game, effectively.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. And it is always, there is, I would say that a simulation of a simulation, which is uh, part of the society and part of the community. Really, we are simulating when the original war game, the original D&D and all that sort of old school games. We are simulating a war, simulating a dungeon crawling. So we are in a situation where we are simulating a tabletop RPG game through online interfaces.
Yeah, I don't know. Some things just go too far for me.
Right? Yeah.
But on that issue, I know it is getting quite late down under, and I'm sure you've had a busy day dodging drop bears and a million killer snakes.
Yep.
So wanted to thank you for coming. Anyone who's interested in the chats on YouTube, Rumble, and X, I have posted the link to Cloudbreaker Alliance, where you can go find out more information. You can go buy the game digitally, and I'm sure there'll be ways to keep notified of new developments. And in the YouTube links, we have links to Cool History Bros and Don't Stop Thinking, CJ's 2 channels about history and tabletop gaming.
All right.
So,
thanks for having me. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks a lot for coming. And oh yes, don't forget the spiders.
Right. Yep.
All right. So we'll see everyone. Nerd Council of Doom over on the channel at the Nerd Council of Doom on YouTube this Saturday, 3 p.m. So thanks everyone for coming, and we'll see y'all later.